Bonjour, buongiorno, and welcome to everyone here and everyone that's joining us on Zoom for this very special event that's been organized by the French and Italian Graduate Students Association. First off, I must thank all those who have made this possible. That's everyone at the Center for Languages, Literature, and Culture. They helped us with advertising the event, finding the space for us, and making this recording possible. The recording will be available on YouTube, so you can look out for that. A big thank you also to the French and Italian department for all the finance they provided for FIXA. And now, it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Melissa Sigrist, our speaker for today, who will speak to us this evening about her life, her experiences, and what it means to her to become a global citizen through foreign language. More than a welcome, this is actually a welcome back home for Melissa, who graduated from Ohio State University in foreign language education with a specialization in French. Apart from fluency in French, Melissa speaks German and Japanese, and may have picked up a few more, I don't know. Melissa's love for the French language and French culture is what led her first to becoming an educator. After many years in that profession, Melissa switched tracks and embarked on a career in the travel industry since 2013. She has been a tour leader for an international travel company, Women Traveling Together, based in Annapolis. In this role, Melissa travels the world with small groups of women as their tour leader, and she also trains new tour leaders. For Melissa, foreign languages have always been a tool for creating connections with people of other cultures in the US and abroad. In today's talk, Melissa will provide her perspective on how studying foreign languages has helped her in her own career and opened new opportunities, and about how learning a foreign language has been an enriching personal experience for her, allowing her to build bridges and to better understand people from different cultures. Most importantly, learning and speaking foreign languages has taught Melissa to be comfortable with her own vulnerabilities while speaking in the foreign language. It is with much warmth and great joy that I present to you Melissa Sigrist. Thank you. Melissa's talk will be for about 30 minutes, after which the session is open for questions. Those on Zoom are requested to put their questions in the chat box, please. There is also an attendance sheet on Zoom and on the table here for students to fill it out if you want any extra credit. And now, once again, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you. I really and truly thank you for coming, because I woke up this morning and I was thinking, well, who's going to come to listen to this, right? I had these fears of like my husband and my daughter, which was great, and I knew they were going to come, so I was very happy about that. But I really do appreciate you coming today. And she gave kind of she told you everything about me, but I have a few more things that I wanted to talk about. But one thing is, I don't have a PhD. You know, I did get my master's from Ohio State, but I don't have a PhD with oodles of research to back up what I do or what I've done, how I've lived my life. And I also have never published a book, never written a book. I do have some on Snapfish that I did, though, that are really great of all my travels, right? So, but other than that, I really don't have these credentials behind my name. I just have lived and experienced a life of grand adventure. And my life has had a lot of disappointment and a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of failures, but I've also had unbounding joy in my life and really profound love and adventures that I hold in my heart very dearly, right? So it's kind of about, that's my classroom is the world, and that's how I've managed so far. And it started a long time ago, like I think I was in the 6th grade, and one of my teachers had a nice little an LP album that she put on the little record player, and I learned French, right? So we would play French songs, and I just loved it. That was my first introduction to French, and I knew then that I would go to France. I didn't have a childhood of grand adventure when I was little. Like, I was a farm girl, grew up in Northwest Ohio. We had tomatoes and pickles and cabbage, you know, and that we grew all around me. Most of my friends were farmers. When the cabbage season was in, everyone knew that the sauerkraut plant was working because it stunk to high heaven. So I didn't really, Saturday nights I went square dancing. That's what we did, you know. So it was a pretty simple life. But once I heard that French album, I knew that someday I would go to France. So it started, you know, the junior high, not middle school, junior high school, and started taking the French class. And does anyone speak French in here? So my French teacher was Madame Gross. It's kind of an unfortunate name for a French teacher, right? Mrs. Large, Mrs. Fat, I don't know. So Madame Gross was my French teacher. And sure enough, she announced that we were going to go take a class trip and go to France, you know, go to Paris for spring break. And I was ecstatic, thrilled, because I was the best student in the class. And I was the best. I would sing in class, I would make up plays, and we would perform them in class, and I loved it. And I really was the best. But of course, my parents declined that lovely invitation from my teacher, and so I couldn't go. But then when I was a junior in high school, AFS, I don't know if this is like a study abroad program for students. So it was AFS, and I knew I would get it, right? I know I'm going to go study abroad. This is it. And one of my very dear girlfriends and I both applied to go study abroad. She got it, and I didn't. So that was another. These are like little disappointments, okay? I'm not telling you these are my big disappointments. Those are my little ones. But then I knew when I went to college I would do it. And sure enough, you know, I picked Ohio University because they had a phenomenal study abroad program for French. And ended up going my sophomore year to Tours at the Institut de Touraine and lived with a French family when I was there. I had a sister, right? I grew up with 3 brothers, so I never had a sister. I had a French sister. And it really was one of those opportunities where, okay, your bedroom's upstairs. You know, they took me upstairs and I went into my room and opened the window, and it was in the French countryside, and there I was. I mean, really and truly, you open up those 2 windows and boom, there's flowers everywhere. There's the big stone fence, and it was a dream come true, right? That was the first time I was ever on an airplane. And I was in France. And then, you know, my friend came over. We traveled that summer all over. Ran out of money, but he had a guitar. I had a voice. So we sang in the streets of Munich, you know, and got money. They would throw money in our guitar case and things like that. So this was just my grand adventure that I couldn't believe that I was having in life. It was so beautiful. And then I went to Italy, and my friend left me in Italy, in Milan. And he had a girlfriend that he didn't tell me about, but that's okay. But so he was going to go stay with his girlfriend. So I was in Milan in the train station all by myself after we had just spent the night on a postal cart, right? Because we didn't have enough money for hotels. So we slept on a postal cart. And then, you know, then I traveled through Italy by myself. I didn't speak any Italian, but I learned really quickly. And the woman on the train that I went to the Adriatic coast, she shared her sandwiches with me and helped me learn a little bit of Italian. It was so fun, right? But that was many years ago. So I guess you could say, fast forward today, and yes, I am a tour guide. I'm an international tour guide for a company out of Maryland, and it's a women's travel company. It's just for women. And I've found indeed that is my niche. After teaching, it was like my retirement job, because I loved teaching, but what I loved about teaching French was taking the kids to France. I would take them to Paris and the south of France. And then also my middle school kids we took to Quebec, and we did homestay programs. So that was my favorite time of year, you know, and I was really fortunate. I taught in the Wellington School here in Columbus, and they teach immersion, right? So from the time the kids are like 4 years old, they walk into the classroom and it's all in French. So the immersion experience was really the way to go, you know, in learning a foreign language. And so that's how I taught French. And then when I finished that job, retired from there, and I went into travel. And I travel with women's groups from all over the world. They hired me because I speak French, but also because I used to live in Japan. So when the kids were born, or my daughter was born in Japan, and so we lived there for about 4 years, loved it. But so that's how I got hired, was because I could speak these foreign languages. Oh yeah, and then I forgot to tell you too, but then I went to Germany, because I came home from France my sophomore year, and I said, I have to go back to Europe. Oh my gosh, I fell in love, right? Changed me, changed everything about me, my whole inside, because I was this farm girl from Ohio. And all of a sudden, the world just opened up to me. And I saw things I'd never seen before, and old buildings and people that were so different than me, you know? And so I loved it, loved everything about it. So I came back to OU and I said, how do I get back to Europe? I don't have a lot of money. And they said, the German department has a lot of scholarships. So I studied German. And then after my senior year, I went and I studied in Salzburg, Austria, on a Goethe Institute scholarship. They still have them, by the way, if you want to learn. And then in the south of Germany, in Bavaria, I studied in Staufen, in Breisgau, in the Nähe von Freiburg. So that was where I studied there. So that was supposed to be really brief, okay? Not that you want my whole life story, because it's not that interesting. However, what we're here today to talk about is this intercultural competence in today's world. And I know that's a really big thing in OSU, in the language courses, this intercultural competence. And that is the way that I learned, right? I learned in the classroom, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't the greatest student, okay, as far as especially my accents. I was really bad at accents, and I would get, really pretty good grade on the paper, except got so many accents wrong that I had like a C-, It was terrible. But the intercultural competence is really, that was me. That's how I lived my life, right? I lived with this French family. I didn't know that, the dog sat at the table, and then we sat around and had a 3-hour dinner every night, right? So that was new for me. Never had wine before, so I learned how to enjoy a glass of wine over a 3-hour dinner and then get a great night's sleep. It was wonderful. But you can imagine this, farm girl from Ohio. So it was quite different. Like I said, it just changed my whole outlook on life, but also that's where I started with the intercultural competence, was living with a family. Frau Grabner in Salzburg, Austria, she was like 110, I swear she was, when I lived there. But she's the one I learned from, that these duvets with feather, I had a feather bed and a duvet, a feather comforter, and ever since then I've always had feather duvets, because that's what I learned from her in Salzburg. But anyway, I lived this intercultural competence. I learned to get along. Whatever I had to do to get people to understand me, that's what I did. I put these up here because these are really fun, and I just want to kind of give you an idea of where we're going today. So the intercultural competence, okay, we lived in Japan. My husband worked for Honda and had an opportunity to go and work with an engineering program in Japan. Of course, I was ecstatic, thinking they're going to pay us to go live in a foreign country. This is awesome. And so we did a little bit of Japanese beforehand. I had 3 months of Japanese before I left. And they sent me to an immersion school down in Cincinnati. They tried so hard to get me to speak Japanese. And it worked. So the reason I tell you that little piece of a story, there's more in Japan that you hear about later, but this is my son who went to school in Japan, right? So he was young, went to preschool and kindergarten through Japan, and those were his first childhood memories. And he left, he went to Miami University, and then ended up back in Europe, or back in Asia again, going to Japan and Korea and China, and then decided to go teach Korean for a year, or teach English for a year in Korea. Well, that was 14 years ago, and he hasn't come back, right? I mean, he's come back to visit, but so that's like one of my intercultural competences. Now I have this son who has a delightful girlfriend. She's Korean. They've dated for a couple years now, and they think they're going to get together for good. And we have to go over for an engagement ceremony and all that kind of stuff. But so I'm learning desperately how to get along in Korean with her. And she's just a peach. But I'm still learning, right? This intercultural competence is still going on with me. I'm adapting to this Korean culture too. And we travel over there quite a bit. The guy up on the top, that's Adit. He's from Bali, right? This was my last trip last fall to Indonesia. I took a group of women to Indonesia, and most of the trip was in Bali. And Adit is the most delightful, wonderful tour guide I've ever worked with. I work with international tour guides all over the world. And so I have to adapt, right? They are my lifeline as a tour guide. I depend on them for everything. And so Adit, the most gentle, kind, loving spirit, of course, Hindu, you know, Om Swastiastu, you know, we learned all this. We were in the home of, this is a puppet, it's a handmade puppet. And we were in the home of this family that they made these puppets. It's a really old tradition in Bali. And so he's holding up one of the puppets as we were making them. But this is just an example of the people that I still get to meet in this life that just light up my spirit, right? They fill me. And because she's so different, the culture is so different. Now the little gal down here, isn't that a cute baby picture? Okay, so that is my niece's daughter. She was just born in Belgium. My brother followed me over to Europe, right? I was over there, he came after me 4 years later, traveled all over Europe, ended up working in Interlaken, Switzerland at Balmer's. If you've ever been to Interlaken, you know Balmer's, right? So he worked there for 4 years and ended up meeting his beautiful Quebecoise wife over there, and they had a baby. And now she then went to study in Glasgow, in Edinburgh. I think she got her master's in Edinburgh, but she was in Glasgow too, working, and met this great guy from Belgium, and now she lives in Belgium. And that little baby is going to speak French and Flemish and English and Dutch, right? That little baby's going to teach going to speak it all. So this intercultural competency is splashed all over my life. I'm not going to focus a whole lot, just to let you know, though. These are some of the women that I was with in Bali. Let's see. This was, we did a waterfall hike, right? We hiked through, who knows where we were in Bali, but we hiked and ended up in this waterfall. And these were women, most of the women I travel with are like 40 to 70 years old. And a lot of them, the women in that age, like it might be your mothers or even your grandmothers, right? But life was different for them, and they didn't necessarily have the opportunities like you have now, and so for a lot of these women, it's the first time they've gone on a trip. And I see amazing transformations in these women that occur. So that's what keeps me traveling is, of course, it's really fun, but I've been doing it, for 10, 12 years now. And I have seen a lot of the world, and it is such great joy, it really is. But it's the women that really keep me going, because I see amazing transformation even in these older women, what travel does. And the company, just to give you an idea, okay, this is a lady, she's on a Bali high. She'll stay in touch with all these women. She already booked her next tour. It was her first time she traveled with Women Traveling Together is the name of the company. So she already booked her next tour before we even left. This isn't solo travel, it's traveling with like-minded women who like to travel but don't always have someone for a particular trip that you yourself want to experience. You won't be alone unless you want to be. There's all different reasons why people don't travel, right? Fear is a lot for single women especially, or women who are alone, don't have travel partners. So that's the safety issue is really big for the women that I work with, and they feel really safe with me, right? Even though I'm like shaking in my boots sometimes, but that's the type of women I travel with. And this was Donna. Traveling with WTT is a perfect way to travel alone without being alone at all. I felt among friends, and every detail was taken care of. It was safe, fun, and amazing. When you travel, do you guys travel much abroad? Okay, so when you travel, especially when you go by yourself, you leave all of your routines behind, right? And you leave your daily activities, you leave the expectations that others have of you, and it's just you. So all of a sudden you are a blank slate, and something happens when you travel. You psychologically, you have to put yourself out there. You have to make mistakes. You have to be vulnerable. You have to ask for help. That's what happens when you travel. And so I love it when I can make people feel like they're well taken care of. So this is what I do, right? But that's really not, I'm happy to talk about myself the whole time. But what happens is then when you come back from your travel, you walk through life differently, right? And it's experiential, which is why I chose this picture up here, because travel, language acquisition, it's all experiential, especially when you go abroad to do it. I'm a big advocate for going abroad and studying a language, even if it's just a semester, right? It changes everything about you. It gives you a new way to learn things. It's so experiential. So these women too, we do things like we go to cooking classes, right? We do hikes with locals. We go to people's homes, make puppets, that type of thing. But you walk through differently when you come home from travel. So that's my encouragement, is that you will all travel when you leave here and you're going to go book your next trip, right? Get on that airplane and go. So there are a few things, though, that happen in a foreign language classroom, and I'm not sure how you are in your foreign language classroom, but it's pretty scary. And this fear of intercultural competence and the anxiety when you speak other languages is real. I don't know if you've experienced it, but your palms can sweat, right? You're sitting in front of someone who speaks the language much better than you do. You know you're inferior in the language, and you're going to appear stupid. You don't want them to think you're a simpleton because you can't put two sentences together. But there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear with speaking a foreign language, in my opinion. But the way I spoke foreign language was, you got to get really used to that vulnerability and get used to making mistakes. And people are a lot kinder than you would anticipate them to be when you make mistakes. But so that's what, how will you respond when you're in the company of someone who's significantly more capable than you in a language? I think it's a very scary thing. But getting comfortable with this ambiguity is what's most important, right? And mastering the art of imperfection, okay? I'm not a Brene Brown up here, okay? But that imperfection thing is real, especially in foreign languages. If you can make yourself understood in a language, people are going to honor that and respect that. And then in turn, you give them that respect also, right? And it becomes a very mutual relationship with people that are trying to communicate in a language that's not native to someone. But I would say the first thing that you need, though, is this humility, right? It's very humbling because you can look stupid. Like I remember in Japan, when we lived in Japan and the kids were in school, right? Every day, the teachers would write me these little notebooks in Japanese about what my kid did that day. But they would write it in like kindergarten Japanese. It was all in hiragana, katakana. It's the phonetic language, not the Chinese characters. So they would write it in hiragana, katakana, which is like writing to a first grader. So that's a little bit embarrassing. But I had to write them back too. And and I would read these things and talk about humbling, right? I would read these things like, she did not just write that. I'm sure I misunderstood what she said. I'd go back and the next day my tutor would come in and say, did she really just say that my son won't poop in their toilet? Is that what that says? She thought that was really important to write. Nope, he won't poop in their toilet. Okay, so that's what I'm writing about, right? I'm this, middle-aged woman, I'm writing about my kid's poop in a toilet and he won't do it in Japan, right? It's embarrassing, right? But it's humbling at the same time. But I had no choice. But to just to come to his teacher in complete vulnerability and act things out when I didn't know for sure what she was saying. And here we are talking to each other, and she's saying, spreading her feet and saying, okay, right? It's embarrassing, right? But at the same time, you have this vulnerability, this humbleness, this humility, and also an insatiable curiosity. Really? This is the kind of toilet that they have in the Japanese preschool. It's a hole in the ground. That is what they have, right? And now I know what those big trucks at my neighbor's house are that come about once a month, and they have this great big tube that goes inside the house. My gosh, they're sucking out their pit toilets, right? So it's these things that are so different, and yet, there's so much to learn, right? So this insatiable curiosity just makes you want to just keep finding out more and more and more. So the intercultural competence thing, it's a lifelong process. Like I said, I'm still learning. Now I'm learning about Korean culture, right? And my son's girlfriend in Korea. So it doesn't ever stop. This intercultural competence, this thing is from Deardorff. He's a guy who writes a lot about intercultural competence, right? But the attitudes that you have to develop, right? Respect, valuing of other cultures, openness, curiosity, the knowledge, of course, of yourself, of the culture, the sociolinguistic issues. And when I say knowledge of self, this is an amazing, learning a foreign language and being in a foreign language, in another country where you have to speak their language, you learn a lot about yourself, absolutely. So that is really important. And of course, the skills that you're learning in your classrooms, right? You're listening, observing, interpreting, analyzing, evaluating, relating, all those things that you learn in your foreign language classes, also very important. Adaptability, flexibility, empathy, and cultural decentering. Have you guys talked about that, the cultural decentering thing? Is that part of the curriculum, kind of? Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, and this is where the ugly American, you know, comes from, you know, is this, they come out of this culture where we're number one, we're the greatest country on the earth, and you put yourself in another culture, and you still think you're the greatest country on the earth, and surely you're probably one of the greatest people on the earth because you're from it. I mean, it's really embarrassing. The ugly American thing is real. So this decentering, the cultural decentering, is super, super important, and that's what happens when you go and you study abroad, you live abroad, is you start to understand the rest of the world from a different perspective. And to me, that is one of the most humbling things that happened to me, but also you come back different, right? You come back different when you're not the main center of the world. You know, all of a sudden you're not. Okay. So you got to get comfortable with its ambiguity, mastering the art of imperfection. Okay, go Brené Brown. Brené, you have to re-examine the goal of language learning to minimize the fear. My goal in language learning was always to communicate. I wasn't a great, like I said, especially my writing grades were not that good, but my main goal was in communication. I wanted to communicate. I wanted to get to know people. I was curious about people. Tell me about yourself. And then the way the French speak, you know, they speak in such a beautiful way, and the way they put together their words are so amazing that you learn something about the culture just by learning the linguistics of the culture. I think part of your language learning, right? Develop awareness of cultural boundaries, open-minded differences through education experiences. Create opportunities to develop intercultural competence through foreign language acquisition and study abroad programs. Boy, if you have that opportunity, figure out a way to do it. It's expensive, but there's scholarships out there. Increase the interaction between two groups of people to increase mutual understanding. That goes without saying, right? You guys, do you do the talk abroad here? Right, that's huge. Do you like that? Is it interesting? Yeah, so I think that's a really valuable piece. At least you get a little bit of an understanding. There's lots of programs out there, right? Commune Française is another one that you can actually join, like French conversation groups, and so there's lots of that where you can just practice your language. But make the construction and development of personal identity a lifelong goal within the context of learning another language. When you're learning another language, you are changing. Your personal identity is changing, and you're taking on a more universal identity, right? A bicultural identity. The things that you learn in another country become a part of you from other people. They become a part of who you are. So you're developing this universal cultural identity, which is a different type of person. You're different. And sometimes it can be lonely when you come back to the States because people don't understand it. You tell them about your stories and how you've changed, and they don't get it, you know. But then you get around other people that have traveled, and it works again. But it can be kind of lonely because you are becoming a different type of person, not so monocultural. So I think that personal identity, you are changing when you learn a foreign language, when you're interacting in different cultures. You're changing who you are, which I think is beautiful. The paralyzing fear of the unknown, I talked about this, but this is more on a universal level, right? Large cultural divides discourage groups from seeking to understand the other party's point of view, and that is not a political statement, but it kind of looks like one, doesn't it? So these cultural divides, you know, all of a sudden, I think it promotes like tribalism, you know, like, well, I want to make sure I have my group here, so I'm not going to talk to that group, but I got my group and I'm safe. So the fear of appearing inadequate or ignorant, I think that's a real fear, especially when you're a university student, right? You're here and you're developing your language skills, but fear appearing inadequate or ignorant is very real. The perspective only from the dominant culture needs to be deconstructed. That's one of the biggest, most important pieces of studying abroad and studying a different language, is you have to deconstruct that dominant culture thing. I can't even explain the growth that goes on internally when you're not part of the dominant culture. Ask anyone who's not. And this is within the United States as well as when you study abroad. You can find these different cultures right with, you're not in the dominant culture here in the United States, right? When you study abroad, you learn how to put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And you learn, you're humbled, it's humility, but you really learn to listen to other people because you have to, your life depends on it. And so when you come back to the States and you encounter people of a different culture, it makes you a better listener and a more empathetic person, right? To try and understand people that are within our own culture. Many of us experience increased anxiety due to perceived incompetence in language acquisition. Learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable is fundamental in our human development. That's what pushes us to learn new things, right? We're made as humans to go out and experience and to learn more and to learn things that we don't know about. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's kind of like this cloud of unknowing, right? You just step into it, breathe, and learn, right? So you don't have to be perfect at everything. I feel like I've said that enough times that maybe you're not going to forget it, okay? Get used to being uncomfortable. It's a great place to be. That's where growth happens in you. And you think, wow, I came to college, I'm comfortable, I love Ohio State, this is great, I never want to leave, I love it here. But that just means that you're very comfortable and it's time to move forward again. Because all that growth that happened from high school through college, when you take it to another level, where you're going to another country to experience something, the growth is astronomical, right? So that happens. So I'm going to ask you to push yourself forward on that. And have this wide open curiosity. That's what will motivate you and keep you really excited and happy about learning, is this curiosity. Again, it changes our perspective with experiences outside of one's dominant culture and language. Increase our understanding, mutual respect of cultural differences and the diversity of human identity. Foster personal growth through experiences that take us out of the comfort zone and increase our capacity to truly listen to another person and ultimately to trust ourselves in that space of vulnerability. I feel like I'm giving a life lesson here, like a spiritual director, right? But I'm telling you, foreign language does this automatically, which is why it's such a valuable, valuable tool for you that you have in front of you. Foreign language forces this human development, right? This vulnerability. Bridge cultural identities in order to create work and a life that is deeply universal. I think, I'm all about world peace, right? But truly, if we had more people who actually went abroad and had this intercultural competence where they could understand people of other cultures and trust them and learn from them and be curious about them. This is a universal global citizen, right? So I think that's what we're all striving for, is to have this universal adaptation, a universal identity, right? This is what makes the world go round. Oh, and plus it's so much fun, right? And it's so much fun. And this trust that happens, developing mutual trust with others, is the essence of embracing your own vulnerability. Right? Curious, be curious. More than anything, just be curious. And this intercultural competence is a lifelong thing. Now, I put this up here just, this was a really good exercise for me because I had to go back and kind of look at my life and say, okay, what's going on in my life? But the studying in Tours, France, living with a family, right? That was big. The Goethe Institutes in Salzburg and Staufen. Then living in Japan, going over with 2 kids, coming back with 3, right? I had a baby while I was in Japan. American parts made in Japan, right? But, so I had a baby. Here I thought, I already had 2 children in the United States. I thought I knew how to have a baby, right? This is not that difficult. I didn't have any like medicine, natural birth, pro. And then I went to Japan. They know how to have babies in Japan, right? The mother, I had to stay in the hospital for a week, and it was a regular delivery. I had to stay in for a week. They took care of me. They brought me dinner in my bed. They brought me my baby. They changed her diapers. And I just rested because they have such respect for a woman's body and what it goes through in childbirth. This country, get up, get back to work. You can go out and jog, get that weight off. Boom. It's like, no, man, your body's traumatized. It goes through this stuff. In Japan, they know how to bring a woman back to good health, right? And they and the baby too. And I'm not going to go here. No, I probably shouldn't tell that story. No. Okay. I learned a lot of things from the midwives when I was in Japan. They taught me how to take care of my own body and how to take care of my baby's body. And it was my 3rd child. I thought I knew. They know how to have babies. Teaching in an immersive classroom and traveling abroad with students for homestay experience, I loved it. If you ever get to teach in a classroom, immersion's the way to go, right? It's fun, and the students will rise up to that. And I'm so glad to see that that's what Ohio State does now. The traveling abroad as a tour leader, yeah, that's what I do now, right? I do about 5-6 trips a year, and I have so much fun. I have such a grand time meeting people from all over the world and working with these national guides of the country, of the host country that I'm in. And I do domestic tours as well, but I've been to Japan and Indonesia and Ireland, of course, and Italy and France. And I'm hoping to go to Africa next year, but I haven't been there yet. But this is what I love to do. It's a joy for me. But what makes it a joy is I don't have any issue with intercultural competence, right? I am right there. I am so humble with my people. And I just am like, I'm in your hands, and I know that you're the expert here. And I'm just this American kind of tour leader. And I let them take me, and it's so wonderful. But you got to know that, right? You got to learn how to work with people in different cultures, different languages. And the first thing is being humble. That's the first thing. Don't try and show off your language skills. I tried that. That didn't work very well either. Heritage Project Civil Rights Tour of the South. Now, I threw that up there because, honest to goodness, one of the things we're involved in this group here in Columbus, Ohio, Heritage Project's Civil Rights Tour of the South. And it's a group that really believes in teaching kids about the history of the United States, especially of the African-American experience in the United States. The tours are, there's all different types of people on the tour, but for a lot of people, we go down to the South. We do Atlanta and Montgomery, Birmingham, and we walk the bridge. We go to the Equal Justice, I don't know what you call it, the lynching park, basically. And it's such a powerful, powerful trip. But when you talk about intercultural competence, this is where I'm saying it's right here in the United States. And we don't have enough people that understand intercultural competence in our multicultural country that we live in. And it would be a lot better off if we did, right? Then yoga. Oh, okay. So I do yoga, bringing it into the body. Immersion language learning is similar. It's experiential learning, okay? And so nobody goes to a yoga class and after 2 times they're perfect, right? And they do great yoga. It takes a year, to really become a good yoga student, right, a practitioner. And it's the same here. In experiential learning with a language, right, you're not going to become this perfect language speaker right away. So keep going. Imagine your own future, right? Make your life a mission of self-discovery, seek out opportunities to broaden your mindset, do study abroad. Cultural competency, it's an intercultural competence, a lifelong thing. Keep learning languages in order to broaden your perspective. I'm still trying to learn Korean and I'm 62 years old. 63, oh my gosh. Make time for reflection because that's really where it all gels, it all comes together. This one, I really love this. The more porous our identity becomes, the better off we are as a human race. So let these other cultures seep into who you are. Let them change you. And you know, there's a one that's missing here, but that's okay. I put this up here because if I needed extra time, because I didn't think I would talk enough, I put this up here. But these are just some travel companies. But I would say that I should look at, there's one thing I wanted to leave you with, okay? There's so much I didn't say, but I ramble. This is one of my favorite quotes. This is Marianne Radmacher. She says, "I am not the same, having seen the moon shine on the other side of the world." That's one of my favorites. And so that's what I'll leave you with. Try and go see the moon shine on the other side of the world, and you'll see how it changes you. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions about what I do. Okay. Yeah. And I talked too long. Sorry about that. Do you have any questions? Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is so interesting. Like I've been sitting here the whole time. Hi. Okay. First off, thank you so much. This is so exciting. I feel like looking at all of these, I'm just writing down the websites, being I'm gonna just travel this. I'm gonna give up and just travel for now. But I'm interested in kind of the idea of preparation that comes along with intercultural competence. And I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to, you know, if you guys do and kind of to what extent and how much you do when you take these groups of women to these foreign countries, and you had said that sometimes it's their first time traveling, you know.
Yeah.
Do you guys do any prep work of like language or just kind of cultural knowledge before these countries? Or
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so great now that Zoom is here, right? We used to do, you know, email chains and telephone calls, right? I reach out to all of my travelers before we go anywhere, but now we do Zoom, and it's great. And so they get like a 45-minute kind of lesson about the culture that we're going to, and the cultural, the taboos and the mores that, you know, you really need to know, so as not to embarrass yourself and not to offend your host. So absolutely, Zoom has been excellent for that. So yeah, that does absolutely take place, and it needs to take place because it can be very embarrassing, and very, very embarrassing for the company that I work for, to bring travelers that are disrespectful, and not because they mean to be, but just because, yeah, they are ignorant of the culture. So absolutely, that's a big piece of it. Anyone else?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your language experience, like you're traveling Europe a lot, and you show us a picture of your family. And I wanted to ask you how learning so many different languages changed the perception of family, because I also did study abroad semesters, and kind of like I have friends, they're like family for me now, and they live on the other side of the world. I was wondering if you had the same experience.
Yeah, I like to say that I mean, I have my biological family here. I'm very, very, very fortunate. But I also have my tribe, and my tribe are people that get me, and they understand my insatiable curiosity for travel and for exploring the world. And I don't have many in my hometown. I find them out on the road. So it does. I would say I have a different concept of, I mean, my family is my most special thing to me, don't get me wrong. And they're very, I would say they're pretty diverse, my family. But the travel bit, I have a tribe and it's not a lot of people that I live with around my hometown at all. So sometimes it's a little isolating, but I find them on the road. I really do. And I find them in other tour guides in other countries. So it's a different type of relationship, a different type of friendship. It's not one that you go meet and have coffee with every week. Thank you. Did that answer your question? A little bit, yeah. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that line, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Given the epidemic of anxiety among young people, probably caused by social media or digital media in general, at least in part, have you noticed kind of a difference? I don't know how often you work with young people or not, but I don't know, do you have any thoughts on this problem and how we might, in the language classroom, because it can rear its ugly head, especially in the language classroom, and then this question of going abroad, students with anxiety who have enough trouble getting out of the house. I don't know, any thoughts on what we could do?
That is so real. That is so real with young people. And I just, I feel for young people today because you grew up differently. You had the phones. I grew up in books, where you really get to know a character and you get to understand the character in the book, and then you start to relate to the character and you feel like they feel. We're in social media, it's a quick, kind of go through. So I think that the loss of books and now the phone, there's nothing like going without your phone. There's nothing like it. I forget where I was the other day now, I'm thinking of, but I didn't take my phone with me, I forgot it. And it was the most freeing experience ever, that I had nothing and I didn't have to respond to anybody. But the anxiety that comes, it's so real. What I would say, man, get a good therapist because it's beyond me, it is beyond me. But when we're on trips, we don't use our phones. We'll share pictures at the end of the night, but most of the time it's like, no, we don't use our phones. And by not using your phones and by being abroad in a different place where you're uncomfortable, all of a sudden you have to be in the moment. You have no choice. You are in the moment, and there's nothing like being in the moment because you really understand the depth of a human connection when you're not distracted. And having that depth of a human connection, to me, reduces anxiety because all of a sudden I can trust you with my vulnerability. Because am I making sense? I just I feel for young people, and if anxiety is an issue, get a good therapist. But I'm serious. I mean, it's just like, because life is so rich without anxiety. I didn't grow up with anxiety. You guys, your whole life has been a crisis. And, and that's, you had 9/11, you had Columbine, you had parents who were so afraid to raise you, and make sure they had everything safe and perfect for you. And you had the financial crisis, and then you had the pandemic. I mean, your whole life is a crisis, for goodness sakes. Of course you have anxiety. But you have to reprogram. You have to reprogram. And I think studying abroad, studying a foreign language, being with other people and making those connections when you're out in another country and you have no choice but to connect with people because otherwise you're going to go crazy. That's when, I don't know, I feel like your anxiety decreases with human connection, is my opinion.
Hello. Thank you for your, I don't know how this works. Okay. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was a joy to attend.
Oh, thanks.
And I would like to ask about, you mentioned intercultural competence within the United States, that even here, which I thought was a very good point, there's so many different cultures going on in the United States. And so in this department even, in the French and Italian department, we have lots of people from different cultures. And so I guess, like, for instance, when people go on that experience or have an experience with other cultures within the United States and have to face that intercultural competence situation, I guess, could you speak a little bit to that and how people react, even perhaps how you reacted at your first go around with having to face like that intercultural competence in a place that is usually familiar? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I've kind of surprised myself. All right, there's a deeper and a better answer, but I'll start with this. I kind of surprised myself with, I recently moved, well, about 5 years ago, moved to a new place that was very different than where I had been living. It's very, I don't want to politicize it because that's not it. It's just very conservative. People are very conservative there. And yeah, you learn to just be who you are and be confident in who you are and being respectful of who they are. And that can be difficult when you don't respect some of their thoughts or some of their beliefs, but you have to respect the person. And when there's that proximity, to use my husband's phrase, when you have proximity with people who are different than you, you live beside them, you know, you have a beer with them, you meet them at a party, then that's when attitudes can change, and that's part of intercultural competency is being able to be with people that are different than you and honor and respect who they are, and in turn, they will honor and respect you. I had this little picture up here because this was out west, actually, I think it was in Monument Valley, and we had a Navajo guide who went out with us and took us into this really quiet cave, you know, with this, he called that the Eagle Eye, and he sang to us a healing song. And he sang in Navajo, and it was a song of healing, he told us. And I'm not kidding, I had 4 women in that group bawling. You know, women who had recently lost a husband, you know, to a severe illness, and 2 women who had cancer and were fearing their own immortality, right? But by being open to his culture, they felt the healing presence of a song in their bones, you know. So it happens, it's here, and you have to be soft to it, I think. You have to be soft, open your heart.
I think if it's that's it with the questions. We'll wrap up for today. We've had Melissa here for quite a while, and thank you for answering all our questions. Thank you for being here. And we really appreciated your talk, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh yeah, sure.
Please do join us for some refreshments of a few minutes. And once again, thank you for coming back to Ohio State.
Hey, thanks. It's good to be here. It's wonderful to see young people, right? It's wonderful to see young people. So transformational, right? That's what it is. So yeah, and you feel free to come up and talk to me if you want to. I didn't really talk much about travel. I did a little bit, right? But it's just the benefits of travel. What happens? Yeah, I know, I'm so sorry. The switch, yeah. You know, I was done with teaching, and I knew, I could feel it, like, I still loved going into the classroom, but I could feel myself not enjoying it as much, and I didn't think it was fair to be with young people. I wanted